Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pedophile Huntress. Tonight is the panel discussion. Emily's here with me tonight, and Carol may be joining us a little bit later. I'm not sure. But we're here with a common goal. We hope that you find comfort in the things that we do. We're here just to share our experience and our stories, and we want you to be united in your heart and love because we get it, we understand. Tonight, we're going to talk about this is just going to be a really candid discussion. We don't have questions or topics, but the last interview that I did with Priscilla has been quite a hot topic. I've gotten a lot of feedback from listeners. I did a personal post because it agitated me and put me on guard to make sure I was doing the right thing. Had I done the right thing? I reached out to my own mother to make sure that my heart was in a place of forgiveness. So Emily shared the same thing, and I'm going to kind of turn it over to her because I didn't let us talk before we came on, and she and I have not discussed this, but boy, I heard a lot from a lot of people. So, Emily, kind of in a nutshell, we are just here to chat tonight. Tell me what the topic was that kind of made you be engaged with that podcast and what happened last week for you.
Well, I think that what I came away with after hearing that was realizing that everyone's experience in this is so different. And I mean, there are common themes, but I realized that in my heart and my experience, I think I do not expect people to change.
Mhm.
I don't expect people to choose differently because I've never experienced people choosing differently. So it's really hard for me to trust um, the idea that someone would change because I've wanted that to be true for many, many years of
Mhm.
my life. But once I finally faced everything that had occurred in my life and recognized how people truly have been showing up through my time with them, my experience has not been one of people's hearts being soft or wanting to change. And so after listening, I felt a little discouraged and doubted myself some because I thought, have I just given up hope on people? Like, am I
I'm
not?
laughing because I'm the same way. Keep going.
So I was like, oh my gosh, am I so disenchanted and like downtrodden that I'm not
Mhm.
trusting that people could change? But
So
I spent so anyway, that was my initial reaction.
no, I think
Beyond and other things like, just feeling for that family, feeling for
Mhm.
victims, feeling, all there's a whole lot. But for me, internally, how it was for in my growth and my because I believe God brings things into our lives when we need to grow the
Mhm.
next step, right? So I'm always like, okay, what does this mean, God? Like, are you going to teach me something here? What do I need to unpack? What's going on? So that was what it was for me in listening to that.
And that's why it was so important for me to then do the Babble of the Huntress, that 4 minute, because it really, I had a check in my spirit. I feel that we teach when we come on here. We share our
Mm-hmm.
stories through experience, and I take that very seriously. I don't want to, I know I cuss and that might have offended people. I came through a really hard child. God loves me anyway. But otherwise, I really try to be incredibly mindful and really full of the spirit when I
Mm-hmm.
share something. So she and I had very opposing views, and it was a hard interview for me because my heart was racing through some of it because I was so opposite of what she was representing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the interview ended. My children said, "Hey, Mom, how'd that go?" They often do. And I said, "That was a really hard one for me.
Yeah.
My heart's pounding." I felt that we were really polar opposites in much of what we believe. While I wish and hope that pedophiles can change, I think it's a very slim. In fact, my mom told me this, that there's this study. maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but I have a feeling it is, that they are the lowest percentage of the population that actually rehabilitate. My opinion is that they're so given over. Like, one of the things I said in that interview was, I cannot believe that a man of God that has the spirit of God can rape a
Mhm.
child. I
Mhm.
just, I can't, because I can't. And then she said back to me, well, no, I'm not saying that God's bad, but you are saying, though, that if you know what I mean, you're this preacher and then you can go rape your daughter in the back room and
Right.
come up and be this preacher. You know what? Satan appears as an angel of light. And so did you, what did you think about that part? So I just think there's
It's-
a lot to unpack here
There was
tonight.
a lot, and I really want to respect Priscilla because I feel she's
I do
heartfelt,
too.
and
I
I
do
want
too.
to honor all of her work and energy and her passion for helping people heal and all that. But I didn't feel at peace about everything that she said, and it was so contrary to my experience. And um, so I guess I can't discount anyone else's experience, but in my understanding, the likelihood of someone becoming trustworthy again, and I don't know if that's what she was representing, but I would never trust a person. I would, and I am of the opinion that it's best to break from that whole system. But
And so,
similar to what the gentleman
mhm,
from Canada teaches,
right.
that's what
The
I've
counselor.
yeah, that's
Yes.
just what seems to be the most
Hmm.
consistent. And I've also participated in a program by Natalie Hoffman called Flying Free, and it's for women in emotionally and spiritually abusive marriages where there's like really sneaky, hidden, covert abuse.
Yes.
And it's an excellent program. And I participated because of my family and trying to figure out how to navigate the relationships with my family. And she and her coaching team allowed me into the program even though it wasn't about marriage for me.
Super cool. Still
So
relationship, close
yeah,
relationship.
yeah. And that program really, really was helpful for me. And I found myself weighing the thoughts and ideas presented from the podcast where you interviewed Priscilla against what I'd learned in that. And I realized I come from a really different angle now than I did
Hmm.
before I even participated in the program of Flying Free. Just because I have spent a lot of time around people who have had similar experiences to mine, and I've been taught by some people who have, um, I think, guided me in a really good way. And it's
Right?
changed me though. And I'm thankful that I have chosen to face face it, if that makes sense, like how
Yeah,
hard it is.
right. So Emily, one of the
Mhm.
things here that I think some of these threads were the same thing that I felt. I was in counseling off and on for 20 years of my life because I had to. One of the things that I did in my Babble of the Huntress 4-minute chat after that interview was I held teachers accountable. I didn't hold Priscilla necessarily accountable because she's following this kind of twisted teaching that Christians do that say, oh, now think about this. So first, let's say this. Your pastor comes to you, a neighbor comes into your home, rapes you, leaves, comes into your home, rapes you the next month, does this for 5 years, and then that pastor says to you, you know what? I know that was horrible, but I want you to completely absolve him of any guilt, any responsibility. I don't want you to ever turn him into the law. I want you to forgive him. And furthermore, go have dinner with him, invite him over as many times as you can. We would all say, what right?
Right.
But when it's your parents, for some reason, and she talked about how Satan wants to destroy and separate families. Dude, if you come from a family of incest, you should be separating from that family. That is
Mhm.
not what you want to bring forward. You can't bring hell with you. And I did say
Right.
that. And I do want to honor and respect her. But I think that the leaders before her, like Joyce Myers, and it's hard for me to say those things because I want to respect them as teachers, but at the same time, you cannot take these tender reads, these people who are barely alive in life and snuff
Right.
them out by saying, oh, you know what? You got to now look at the pedophile. No, you don't. No,
Well,
you don't.
I honestly feel that one of the most important things I've done in my growth is to completely separate from the church for a time. And I know that sounds
No,
horrible,
I get it.
but I needed to get out of all of that religious pressure,
Exactly.
because I think some of it is innocently presented, not realizing how grave of a
Mhm.
situation a person's in. Um, but others of it is just like this systemic wrong understanding that is so destructive for someone who's really a victim of abuse.
Hugely,
Yeah, and it's not
hugely.
just in incest, it's in marriage, it's
Right.
in,
I agree.
yeah,
I was in a really bad marriage, and the counselor basically told me to be quiet and go home. He was
right,
raping my children. I have scars on my body from him,
right,
and I had a Christian counselor tell me to
hmm,
go home and reconcile, and actually to
right,
not build myself on money because we had money. What is happening here? Me
right,
and my children were being destroyed. So you're absolutely right, and it's why I had a conviction for us to really talk about this because even my
hmm,
daughter called and was like, "Whoa, mom, that really bothered me. Do you want me talking to dad?" And all of a sudden, no, I have spent, and that's going to make me cry. I have spent 25 years trying to protect her from her father. I
hmm,
am never going to tell her to go reconcile with him,
right,
forgive him, absolutely, leave him in the hands of God. Absolutely. But it hurt me that she was like, Mom, are you saying you want me to be this way with
oh,
dad? Oh, Emily, it was like, oh my God, sweetheart, you know that's not me. She's like, well, I just wondered because, see, all of a sudden
mm.
we all start saying, oh, we've done something wrong. We've
And
separated from him. We're supposed to take care of him, right? Did you start feeling that?
well, I did hear Priscilla say that reconciliation is optional. She did
Yes.
speak that. So I didn't feel that way. I felt emboldened that I'd done the right thing because I didn't feel at peace about the stance she was taking. So, but that was how I responded.
Right, right.
Um, because also, you know, I just do not trust my family at all. And I didn't feel pressured to go back to them at all after listening. But I think your point is we are all tender, very
Exactly.
tender, and
Very
we've
tender.
already been manipulated and controlled by so many different parties, our abusers, the people trying to tell us how to handle the abuse, sometimes ourselves convinced, like being confused that we need safety. Like that's our first and number one thing, is that we need safety so we can
Mhm.
heal. And
So much so. And we should
yeah.
not, like I told her, my whole thing is take your eyes off the abuser. I
Mm-hmm.
know one time, I swear this was an angel, and he wrote down, Jody, you see you. And you know, it changed my life because I was looking at everybody else except myself. And you know, when we have this time where we are accountable to God on the great judgment day that Revelations talks about, he's not going to ask me what my dad did. He's going to ask me what I did. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a beautiful significance in that, right? It's not my job to take care of this man that harmed me completely,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a beautiful thing that God does that allows us to separate ourselves. And I think it's like what you said, there is this religious trauma that comes, and it's the spirit of religion. I started that podcast by saying the spirit of religion the incest sits
Mm-hmm.
behind the spirit of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that. I know a lot of people don't believe in the Ephesians 6 warfare. I do. I think there's spirits going all the time. I think this Western hemisphere does not believe in that the way that a lot of the other world does. So I do believe there's a spiritual battle
Mm-hmm.
going on. And I think religion sits in front of incest and hides it. So when you now have this smattering of being raped by the man who is teaching you God, and you're praising God on the same stand with the man who's raping you in the back
Yeah.
room, your mind is tragically broken with that
Mm-hmm.
partnership. Right? It's so you've got to separate. The biggest thing that I try to really separate is the God of the Bible and then the spirit of religion. And they're quite different things. And the spirit of religion, I said this one time, I had this meme that went out that God didn't hurt you, the spirit of religion did. But people are hard pressed to see the difference. And I know that you know it because you and I've talked about it. But I do think it's fair. I remember this time when I was in my 20s and my ex-mother-in-law at the time, I was so confused. I was just leaving my father. He raped me until I left his home at 17. And he also taught me about God. So I wanted to love Jesus, but I was all wrecked up. And I remember she said to me, Jody, look at it like this. You can throw everything out but Jesus. And you know what, Emily, that helped me because
Mhm.
all I knew was he'd helped me when I was 4, but I was so interwoven with the spirit of religion, I couldn't define the two. And so I feel a responsibility and accountability for the listeners. A lot of people listen to that podcast. I
Mhm.
feel a responsibility to just talk about it. And 100%, I want to respect everybody's opinion in life. But I also feel a strong accountability because when I was a young woman, it was why I asked her how old she was. I
Mhm.
was very mixed up in my
Mhm.
theology, and it was very hard to determine how much God loved me and how much He wanted me to be free from that family that had
Mm,
hurt me for
mhm.
my entire
Mhm.
childhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and, do you mind if I respond?
No,
I
please.
just wanna touch on a few things you said because it's been really interesting in my recovery, the times that I've had the most connection with God have been just completely separate from
Mhm.
most people even, like, just
Paul
being
too, and he
in
wrote 2/3 of the New Testament.
yeah,
He
just
went away.
being in nature.
Yes.
I've
Yes.
done a lot of hiking, a lot of walking outdoors, and it came to me actually this week when I was thinking about forgiveness that I think that the moment when I actually fully forgave my parents was when I heard God say, "Let go, they're not yours. They're not
Oh,
yours to fix." Like
you see you.
it
Exactly.
because I so desperately wanted them to be different than they were,
Right.
than they are, that I was trying so hard to find a way to help them, but that was not my work to do. And
Yes,
it
it's so beautiful.
and I it came to me this week that that was actually forgiving because I was able to stop fixating on them
Right?
because I felt God pulling my heart and saying, "This isn't what I actually want you to do. You don't that's theirs. That's theirs and mine. They are mine, and you
Right?
trust me with them," which was very interesting because I was so saddened by that at the same time. Like it was so much grief
Mhm.
because I realized that my hope had been most likely a false hope. Like there wasn't going to be a change. And it was like a, a mix of letting go of the ideal that I had wanted for so long, but also
Right?
a freedom at the same time. And I remember in the midst of the walk, I was like crying and crying, but then I realized I'm 40 years old. Wait, I have like 40 or 50 more years. This is going
Right?
to be such a different life. Like it was
Right?
like as I was realizing this, God was showing my heart so much burden was being lifted. And it was an insight to me of what forgiveness means. It's like giving up on trying to change anyone or punish anyone. I have not tended toward that side. I've had anger, but I don't it doesn't have to do with what they deserve or don't deserve. Like you talked about with
Exactly.
absolution, it really was an experience of like what they say that forgiveness is for you.
Mhm.
And so that was completely apart from any teacher, from any counselor. It was just
Mhm.
God and me out on walk.
I love it. Remarkably, I had a very similar thing, and I think you and I have discussed this once, but it was hard for me to let go of my mother. My mother and I were not close at all. She was incredibly cruel to me all of my childhood. So I wanted a closeness with her. I wanted to know her. And I remember I was actually sitting by my fireplace. I love fires. And I was just looking into the fire. And I could just see God saying, Jody, let her go in the water. You've got to let her go. And so we're both saying the same thing, and it is the message of God because unfortunately, as a child, our burden is to take care of these people that have taken everything from us, but all we want is a fixed relationship. So
Hmm.
to me, absolution, what this weird, quiet messaging of absolution says is, I don't have the strength to go through this story. I don't have the strength to see the
Yeah.
reality of
Yeah.
what my life is. But if I have some kind of absolution, we can all just put it under the carpet and it goes away. And
Hmm.
I understand why it's done. It's just not the message of God. It's not.
Hmm.
And only He is the one that can erase all sin. We can't. Our forgiveness doesn't. And I asked her that, does your forgiveness take away His accountability to God? Well, in heaven, He won't have accountability. That's not what I asked
No,
you.
that is not what is true in
That
my belief
no,
either.
no,
Yeah.
that does not take away. Our love actually doesn't even help them. It's God's love and only God's love that can help any of us. Doesn't even matter. Like you say, it doesn't even matter. However, I stay in my lane on incest because I know it's my calling and nobody stays there. And we can always broaden the road, but there are millions
Yeah.
and millions and millions of people who, so that's why I say that. But can it go for anything? 100% abusive, any abusive relationship, abusive friendships, right?
Hmm.
I just don't think I don't need absolution. I don't need rose-colored glasses. God has given me the grace and the courage to see the truth of my past in all of its blaring glory. And that's not always easy, right, Emily? It's
Right.
hard. I mean,
No.
but it is who we are. And so
Hmm.
to march on successfully in a very authentic person, it has to be that. You know what I mean? And so I just thought it was interesting. What else did that spark in you? I know my daughter, she just said, Mom, it just stirred so many things. I think
Well,
it's, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Did you want to say what
No,
your
no, I
daughter
want you
said?
to go.
Okay.
No, please.
Well, it got me really curious about what the organizations that Priscilla's in. So I looked it up and I was looking up
Oh,
the programs, and there's some ideas that have been pitched to legislation and things because they lobby. And I realized in the midst of it that it challenged my understanding of rehabilitation and repentance. And I
mm,
realized that I only trust someone changing if it's a completely voluntary choice. That
mm,
I think it's coercion and then often leads to a fake change if someone will gain anything from that participation in a rehabilitation program, because that's what I experienced with my parents. I asked them to go to counseling if they wanted to be in relationship with me, and I wish I'd never done that. That should have been 100% simply their choice. That would have been the
I think
best.
that's so much. I think that's so wise. Because again,
It
we're trying to repair this broken relationship.
Right. And so I learned that in my experience that step on my part I regret, because the only reason
Mhm.
they did was because I asked them to, and then it just led to more manipulation and more trying to control me, and it turned into this weird chess game almost. And I was like, this is not what I imagined would happen, but it that was my experience with that type of transactional.
Exactly. Yeah, no,
uh,
I agree with you. And
yeah,
this is
and so I think that if true repentance and change in heart is going to happen, it has to be 100% voluntary on that person's choice and not guarantee or gain them anything, in my mind. Like, it just
well,
needs to be
that's the
because
way,
of
right?
their heart wanting to be in communion with God and be at peace in the world, regardless of what they quote unquote gain from it.
Exactly. Well, and that to me, it's why I said you have to have an accountability. And I used to tell my girls, if something happens to me and I'm not here, and your father comes back and wants to reconcile, make sure he tells you exactly what he did. Because a repentant heart is going to say, oh my God, I'm so sorry for raping you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I
Mm-hmm.
said, what did this exchange look like? Now, if you just go to one of these pedophiles and Dad, now Dad, what happened between us, and I'm going to forgive you, and Dad either looks up or doesn't look up and never responds,
Mm,
I'm sorry, that is not forgiveness. That is not, he might receive your forgiveness, but that does not make him a changed man just because he let you talk. And I saw it in my own family. I went back time and time again. Now, of course, me and Dad did have murder between us, and that made a huge responsibility to me to fix this. Um, I give that to God, I do, but I still do what I can on this side of earth because this lady just went into a ground 50 years ago, and that's a hard thing to live with. But God and I deal with that, and it is ultimately his choice. He can do anything he wants to do. But you have to have accountability. Like, going
mhm,
to Dad. Now, this is what accountability looks like. My mom called me, said, Dad's dying, your father's dying, hospice is coming in. If you want to talk to him, you have one last chance. So I go in. I didn't talk to my dad a lot, 20 times, maybe, I don't know, after I severed ties with him. Rightfully so, so my children wouldn't be abused.
mhm,
Anyway, so I go back and see him, and he's not a changed man at all. He, drank a half gallon of booze. I mean, like, whatever, it doesn't even matter. Eat your licorice. I mean, it doesn't matter. So I walked in, and ultimately what I'm trying to say is we talked about the murder, and I said, Dad, I've had guilt in my life since I left that room, ever
mm,
since I was 3. And he sat back on the couch. And for that statement, he said, I'm sorry. And then he sat back
mm,
again and said, I am so sorry. That is what accountability looks like. He never apologized for any of the rapes that he did to me. He never said he
mm,
loved me, but he did apologize for the murder. That's an apology. If they don't apologize to you, do not fantasize some kind of reconciliation in your mind that has never been spoken, because I don't
mhm,
want you to stay in bondage. This is
mhm,
love that you hear in my voice. It's absolute love and protection for the person listening. If you go to them and then you almost hallucinate an apology. I know, because I've tried, you know what I mean? Like, I used to
mhm.
do
Because
it
we
with
want
my
it
own
so
dad. We
badly.
want it so bad. I'd think, oh, Dad, you
Mhm,
know what? He didn't really tell me to get out, or he didn't call me a liar. He must think, wow, that he's sorry. But see, if you think you're
mm,
sorry, they're going to speak it. But I've lived that. You know what I mean? You
mhm.
can't hallucinate an apology. An
And
apology sounds like I'm sorry.
I also think that it's like not living in truth, and it's not promoting actual truth in the abuser's life either.
Oh, 100%.
Because then it lets
Yes.
them off the hook, and maybe they think, oh, I'm forgiven,
Yeah.
everything's good. But no, no, like they might have just missed out on a whole huge thing in their growth too. Because do you see what I'm saying? Like
Oh,
it like
Emily, do you
stunts,
know, I do
it
I see what
completely stunts the entire process of transformation.
do you know what an absence of love does? Is speak an absolution of all things. Actually, that doesn't require any love at all. That actually
Mm-hmm.
says, I'm not even going to go visit this with you because it was so uncomfortable while you were raping me. I'm not even going to talk about it. But I'm going to just decree this absolution. We don't have to talk about it again. And I'm going to fabricate that you accept it completely. This is what
Mm-hmm.
real love looks like. When I walked in, and I'm not trying to put myself on any kind of pedophile. This was after fighting with my father my entire life until he died 10 years ago, or 14 years ago now. And I walked in and he said, What are you doing here? And I said, You know what, Dad? I don't need your love. Your love is so filthy and convoluted. And I mean, I didn't say any of that. I just said, I don't need anything. But what I did say next was, I am worried about your soul, because I was
Mm-hmm.
in the rooms where you did all those things. I'm a witness. And that's when he said, You wait a lifetime for a love like that. That didn't really help me. I don't even really
Mm.
understand what that
Mm-mm.
means, but that's what you're saying, Emily. What love
Mm-hmm.
says is, I'm going to confront you because I
Right.
love you. I'm not going to run around making cookies and make your life good. You were horrible. Well,
Right.
I mean, it's not, why would we take that away? But real love says, you might go burn one day, and I might want to talk to you about that.
Yeah. Well, and I remember the moment that I realized that I was acting because I
Yes.
wanted it to be right. And
Yes.
I was being equally manipulative to them because I was trying to make everything work. And I gave my mom some mushy Mother's Day card one year, and because I was
I
like
know.
trying to convince myself and her that we had this great relationship.
I know.
And she kept it on her kitchen counter, like one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when everything fell apart and I was like, we don't share the same reality. This is really what happened in my childhood. This is what you
Right.
did. This is what my dad did. This is what the young man you brought into our home did. I can't I can't pretend that it didn't happen anymore. Like I just put it all out there. And she's like, "Well, what about that card? What about you saying that I'm a great mom?" Like she
Oh.
was so hurt. And that is hurtful. Yes. Yes.
So
Uh
hold on. I'm gonna, this is so incredible how our stories are so different. Through the years of growing up with my father, I draw a card. I have a card actually when I was 4 and I did it to daddy. He kept it. Later, a psychologist actually said the police actually had that studied and said it's clear that this child was sexually abused because I penciled in his penis like 159 times. But anyway, through the years, I'd given him cards that said, I loved you. I did love him. He was my father. I didn't know any
mhm.
different. I thought all girls got raped. When I came back at 21 and confronted him, he said, Wait a minute. I sat on the couch. He disappeared. He came back later with all of those cards and said, This is my little girl. This is the one that loves me. So I
Mm.
would actually offer to you that that's manipulative on their part. It doesn't
Oh,
hurt
you're
them.
right.
They want to manipulate us and say, "Oh no, you love me. You can't do this." See, so
Yeah.
really
See,
get it.
I still get my eyes clouded. It's
But do you see
so,
what I'm saying?
yeah,
She
no,
used
you're
that as a
right. Like she
manipulation.
she victimized herself to then manipulate me
Yes.
to doubt myself. Yes. And she does that over and over. And that's why I'm separated from my parents, because even after dealing with it for 40 something years, I still get confused. I get confused about memories,
Mhm.
as you just heard. So that's why we need therapy. That's why we need separation, because we can't, for me
Exactly.
anyway, I can, I am too tender. Like I
Well, we
can't
are, and
abide.
the problem
Yeah.
is that we have all of these like our mind has been bifurcated, right? Like in this
Yeah.
resource, one sits here, deception sits here, like a little piece of reality sits here, but every time that reality tried to come out in childhood, it wasn't allowed to come out, and so you have to. This is it's. I thought about this today, Emily, because I knew we were coming on and talking, and I thought, Father, we need Christians who have counseling. These
Mm-hmm.
people are fatally wounded in childhood and then stand up and become teachers, but have never had any formal
And
healing.
it
And let me tell you,
perpetuates it.
you know what? It does perpetuate it because now you've got the spirit of religion with the spirit of truth trying to tell truth. That's all mucked up. So when I had, this is a perfect example, and I've said it before, but it's because people that can't understand it go to counseling. They have on Zoom counseling
Mm-hmm.
now. I mean, get books on it. Read The Body Keeps the Score. Read Trauma and Recovery. Get help. You know what? God would support that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, here's the thing. So we have all these Christians, they come through fatal wounding in childhood, they never get help, and then they start telling other Christians how to be. And so
Mm-hmm.
the problem is God needs to raise a generation of people that talk about what health looks like. When I witnessed that murder, before that, this woman was walking. I had all of these, I thought, visits by her spirit. Well, I didn't really know what to think. You know what I mean? I thought, did she get murdered? And then she visited me through the years because her spirit wasn't. I mean, I was
Right.
terrified, terrified all the time. So I talked to my counselor about, hey, I went to the beach this weekend and that lady came walking out of the woods. And he said, Okay, Jody, wait a minute. Tell me where you saw her. And as soon as he asked me the right question, I said, She's walking down. I don't know why that it's just hard.
Yeah.
She's walking down the sidewalk towards me. And you know what? Immediately I realized that was a flashback. Her
Yeah.
spirit wasn't haunting me. We need people that understand us. God is
Mm-hmm.
giving these people wisdom. Like, um, the boundary guys, remember them, Townsend
Yeah.
and Cloud? Those
Yeah.
are men of God who actually
Mm-hmm.
understand how your mind works, how your body's reacting to these things. Christian people of God, please listen to me. Separate yourselves from a church if you need to. Get into good counseling so you can figure out the difference between religion and Jesus and let him heal you. Let him take you away.
Mhm.
When you said that you go away, so Paul wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, my favorite author by far, and David of the Old Testament. But he said, God took me away. No man taught me what
Mhm.
I learned. And there's something about that that actually, so see, when we come together and we have the same message, you know what that's called? That's called the Spirit of God, Emily. When you have the
Yeah.
same message, that's the Spirit that's trying to heal us. So it is these people that don't have counseling that then stand up and are trying to help. Like you say, I think their hearts are good. The problem is you bring mire with you. I loved when C.S. Lewis said, you can't bring hell with you.
Yeah.
And we have to be really careful about that, right?
Yeah. And I just wanted to mention a teacher who is a counselor. He's excellent. His name is Bob Hamp, and he has a counseling practice called Think Differently. But he is amazing the way he just spells out everything. So his name is Bob Hamp. For anyone who's listening, he's on a whole bunch of different podcasts. He's been interviewed a lot of times. He has videos, he has trainings, and he has been so helpful to me in helping me understand abuse dynamics and all different parts of recovery and truth. And he's a Christian man, but he himself has been through abuse. So, like that counselor you interviewed from Canada, he is, he speaks so well. So, yeah, we need to shift, change, blow up, whatever the narrative that's going on, because it is only sustaining incest and sustaining darkness. Did you have to mute yourself for a second?
Because my dog is outside.
That's
Yes, that
okay.
was. So I had to tell him to be quiet. He wants to come into the room. No, but I think you're so true. And there are millions, and there are really good Christians that actually
Hmm.
believe in this. I even, I love Stephen Furtick, and I listened to his church, and he even said, go to counseling. I need to go to counseling. I don't want to go to counseling, but I feel like God's telling me go to counseling. Like there's a lot of God's leaders right now really saying, go to counseling. So it's the Spirit of God does change and refresh, right? I really believe that in different seasons and that sort of thing. Certainly, He doesn't want children to stay quiet in their stories.
Mm-mm.
Certainly, He doesn't want to have you just learn your story and then say this to you. Oh, you're just learning yourself. Guess what? I want you to be quiet. I want you to forget, and I never want you to talk about this again. We'll have
Mm-hmm.
one story that you tell, and then just keep telling that story, but don't ever feel anymore because I don't want you to really feel anymore, but I just want you to go forward. I don't want to know that God. I want to know a
Mm,
God that says, Jody, do you need to cry about that on the car coming
yeah.
home the other day? I was thinking about my children
Mm-hmm.
and how the pain and the loss that their father took from us. And you know what? I just got to cry in his presence and say, I don't go there very much, Father, because it's so deep. But
Yeah.
man, I'm so glad you're right there all the time. And guess what, Emily? I don't feel unhealed for doing that. I feel like I
Mm-mm.
have a loving father that says, do you want to cry on my shoulder? Come and cry on my shoulder. I'm hugely
Mm-hmm.
successful in my life. I think it's wonderful to cry. I think what's healed me and brought me to a better place is because I can cry. I think it's so
Mm-hmm.
sad that you wouldn't have a heavenly father who would say, why don't you get a cup of tea and come sit outside with me? I just want to love on you. Isn't that a beautiful thing?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's what you and I are saying on our walks, on our fireplace. God is not saying that this story ends in one session and everything turns out in this beautiful way and people are changed. Heck, I hope that I'm changing until I go home to be with him. You know what I mean? I got a lot of soot around me. I came through a lot of angst in my life. And so I applied a lot of alcohol. I lived hard. I ran around with men till 2 in the morning. Now, while I don't do those things, I still have a lot of growing up to do in a lot of areas. I'm okay with that. I don't think that makes me unhealed. What do you think about that?
No, and what I think's amazing, I mean, I agree. And I did a lot of crying this week too, driving to work over
Good.
things
That's
of my
so good.
family. I mean, it's a constant, just like
Yes.
it's constant, and that's okay. I mean, we are humans. Have we have hardships, and that's God's there for it. Like he shows up, he's there for all
Exactly.
of it.
Exactly.
And but I also think that we are modeling for the next generation.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
one other aspect of the podcast that I wanted to mention is that I had all of the red flags going about the way she talked about her family, because I've been in rooms with abusers where you try to pretend that everything's fine and you try to keep an eye on them and all that. And it's not true freedom in my experience. And
In
I
my
would
experience
never,
either.
I would never put my daughter in those rooms. I tried when she was
Hmm.
little, and by the time she was 2.5, 3, I was done. I couldn't, I
Hmm.
just was, I mean, it nauseates me thinking about it, just
Right.
that I
Right.
even did that. Right. And
You know,
so,
Emily, though, it is worth talking. Keep going, because that, and I had to bring that up. Are the children safe?
right. Because what are we doing? Like, it's,
Hmm.
it's almost like it's, this is kind of an extreme thing to say, but I felt this way in my life. It's like child sacrifice
Hmm.
for the appearance of peace.
Right. Or
And
to
that
save the
really gets
family.
and
To
that
save the
really gets me
family.
going,
Yes.
because that's what my experience was we're going to rescue this troubled young man, but it was at the cost of me, right?
Oh, it's
So
huge. Right.
so when we repeat that cycle,
Yes.
saying that's what forgiveness is, or I just it does not work for me. And I
Right.
can't speak to every family, like I've said before, but when I heard that kind of presentation of family time together, it made me recoil. It was like fire, like spiritual, like you said. That's how I see
Hmm.
life, and that's how I
That's,
experience it. And that's what happened to me that when that was being explained.
and I want to just say to the listener again, Emily and I did not talk. We do not have a script for tonight. I think it's really important, kind of like when my girls got a hold of me and they're like, wow, my oldest daughter was a little bit better about it, but it really bothered my youngest daughter. And the thing that we have to remember, like Emily's saying, is we break these cycles, and I'm going to say it again and again. We can't bring hell with us. It is not our job to care for the pedophiles behind us. It just isn't. They want us to believe that that's true. You know what? It's God will have somebody to love them. He's really big and he's really good at what he does. And you know what? He's not going to ask you to be the one to go back and repair them. Now, I mean, yeah, forgive them. And if they want to come to you, 100% you could receive their forgiveness. And then I'd still say get on down the road a little ways,
Mm-hmm.
because the amount of counseling these people would need to ever recover, would they ever even do, right? So when we talk about safety, what does safety look like? In my own life, my children didn't find me safe because I'd go back with my parents and reconcile. I wouldn't reconcile. I would reconcile. I wouldn't reconcile. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I drank too much. I didn't. So my own children didn't even find safety around me. When you've raped somebody for years and they're a child, I have a really hard time saying ever, you're safe. I think any counselor would actually say, it's probably safe to assume you should never have children around them. Not even
Mm-hmm.
because the truth is they can groom. There is this vicarious traumatization from across the room where you can sexualize people without even doing anything. There are
Mm-hmm.
spiritual awarenesses that we need in these matters. There is a spirit of incest that's going to come down your line. You better be super careful and cut these things off. So it isn't, it's like playing with fire, right, Emily?
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're saying. It is like playing with fire. And so I just want to be sure to represent that I don't represent any of these things, because it's been my experience too. And I really wanted to say, to Priscilla, how many people do you know that have had your experience? Because I bet she'd say very few, because she kept saying, I know my experience is different. The truth is, the vast majority do not have these types of reconciliation and drastic changes, because these people are so broken and given over to
Mhm.
darkness before they ever enter into that. And if you could preach, I'm just going to say this, if you can stand on a pulpit and then walk off that pulpit and rape your daughter in the back room, Satan's with you. God is
Right.
not with you. There's just, I can't, there's no way that that can be true. There's no
Right.
way you could have the spirit of God and walk in the back room and rape a child. You just
Mm-mm.
can't. So, you know what? I'm just not going to support that. And I don't care. It doesn't matter. I can have my opinion. This is just an editorial and I can have my opinion, but by everything that's good, I can't see it. And please, everybody at large, keep your family safe. If you
Mhm.
have to love them, write a letter and send it to them at Christmas, wrap up cookies, give it to them from a distance. But by everything that's good, stay safe and keep your children safe.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
what it's just it's very interesting. Did you have anything else that
I don't even know what time it is. I don't know how
I
much
don't
time we
either.
have.
I know. I suppose we should check. We have about 10 minutes. It's that funny.
Okay.
And I knew
But
we
I
talked
think
about,
what I realized this week, because I also explored that other story that you had mentioned us talking about, which we're not
yes,
talking
and I was
about.
actually going to move us there, the Mendez brothers,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
Menendez brothers.
So I didn't watch because I'm in a family with an 8-year-old girl and
Yeah,
we
fair
don't
enough.
show that sort of thing on our TV. So I listened though to a podcast that was like a documentary style outlining the whole thing that was also published this fall.
Yeah.
Um, and I came down on the side of the male jurors that every single human, even a victim of incest, has a choice every step of the way. That's what I believe. I believe I've had a choice every step of the way, and I believe every single person has a choice. And I cannot, like, my opinion is that what they did was a crime to their parents and that it was tragic. Their whole life was tragic, but
Right.
they, it was based on the way I understand everything, it was a calculated crime. So I was
And
saddened by all of it and I feel for
right.
them, but I also don't think that they should be pardoned. Yeah, that's how I felt about it all.
So yeah, and I guess, I thought it was interesting that it was out in the news. I thought many things of that. One of the things that I can say is when they talked about the angry sex and that sort of thing, and I don't have an opinion one way or the other. Do I understand a lot of their dismal despair? I do. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
having been sodomized when I was, I don't know, I had lost weight by that time, so I was 16 or 17. It was so painful. And when that
Mm,
memory came back, I had so much hate for my father, just
mm,
absolute hate for him. What could I have killed him? No. But did
mm-hmm,
I hate him? And so men react differently. And so I'm just going to not have an opinion because it's not my life and I don't. But one of the things I found really interesting about the case is how society at large it just can't do incest stories. They can't do
mm,
it. Like what I just said, that was a horrific, painful experience for me that
mm,
even in my 40s when that memory came back, I just hated my father with just a visceral reaction. Talk about the body keeps the score. But it's easy to say, oh, there's millions of people. Yep, we know this happens. But then these brothers come out, and it's easier for society, I really believe, to deny the putrid things that happened in
mm,
that home than to say it was true. And so I did just want to honor and recognize that incest is so detestable. Um, it keeps us in silence. And so I
mm-hmm,
just want to honor that. I do think those brothers, one of the cool things that one of the brothers said in their interview that aired on October 7th, I think, and he said, I never would have thought that I would have seen myself in prison helping men. Men come to me all the time and
mm.
they've been abused a ton. And now I get to be that place that they come to. So
Wow.
I'm just going to pause on saying any kind of judgment, but I am going to say that I acknowledge just the irreparable damage that happens
Mm,
when you are brutally raped in your teen years by a parent, by your father's own penis. It is it's wretched. I can't even tell
I
you
know.
what it's like. And so who knows, but for anybody listening that's lived through this, the reason I wanted to bring it up is just to honor and respect our stories. God honors and respects your stories. There's no story too horrible to tell. Well, I don't really like telling those stories, that the one that I just talked about, it's just the truth of what happened to me.
Mm-hmm,
That's if I was raped anywhere else, somebody would interview me, but because it was my father, nobody wants to talk to me. So you know what? I'm going to be out here for everybody that they won't talk to. And so that was, I guess, the only thing that I wanted to say about that is they called them monsters. The father was a
Mm-hmm.
monster. And to call them monsters, I just felt was a lack of responsibility to every incest victim in
Yeah,
the world.
no,
They're
yeah,
not monsters. They are
no.
not monsters. They are horrifying victims that their whole life has been broken by the act of their father. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they responded. You know what? How do you know what you would have done if you had angry sex for years and years? Your brother came to you and said, "Help me." How do you know what you'd done? You've never been in that situation. So we
Mm,
really can't, we can speculate, but then all we're doing is speculating.
true.
So I just want to honor everybody. I want to end this podcast just by honoring and saying God does indeed set you free. And I told my husband after watching all that, I bet those brothers, and if you ask them in their heart, I bet they'd rather be in prison than continue in that house and be raped one more
Mm,
time. And so
mm,
those are the things you don't ask the right questions of incest survivors sometimes. It's probably
mm-hmm.
better to be in prison than because then when they left their father's house, guess what happens? The whole great cover up begins. And which is worse, the years of
Mm-hmm.
incest or the years where you got to cover it up, love your family, oh, do all, you know what I mean? Like all of
Yeah.
this horse shit that ensues, you know what I mean? Until you finally do one thing. I'm separating myself and I'm going to go bake cookies and I'm going to have tea and I'm going to live my life and I don't give a rat's ass what happens to you. It's not my
Mm-hmm.
business anymore. You're the offender that you should have been in prison, done prison time, but instead I'm going to let God take care of you and I'm going to go have tea, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what I've had to do. I've had to just let it be with them and God. Like I can't fix it. Hmm.
Exactly. We can't fix it. And I think that's the bottom line. And so, Emily, thank you so much for being here tonight. I know you and I are both tired, but I just felt like I wanted to get this up because I did get a lot of feedback from that last one. Please don't feel any kind of condemnation, anybody that's listening.
Mm,
You shouldn't really, reconciliation is such an extreme thing. And you know what the Townsend and Cloud would tell you through their boundaries book? You better have strong boundaries in place and those babies that are in your family, don't sacrifice them. Don't
mm-hmm.
sacrifice them on any means. Because I'll tell you what, pedophiles have a broken way about them. Their vernacular, the way that they are around you, the children are going to pick that up. Don't
Mm-hmm.
have them be around that. Even if they've had 20 years of counseling, please keep these babies safe out here. Emily, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Have a wonderful evening. Peace and protection over you, Emily, this week. All
Thank
right.
you.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.